ecologically based has a whole pile of concerned people about this or that capacity that we're working with, and they show up. And so our voice and their voice and so on in Santa Fe and other places, I think what you've been talking about, Sharon, the way your voice has to be in the work, that you should not have artificial detachment, the critical detachment, which says you're objective, which you're not, and that kind of stuff. So that I think that if we look at your yes man, which I find your work astounding and effective, I would be scanning for the audience that wants to find you. And you may find co-creators there.
There always are actually a couple of people in the audience who get it. And it's great, yeah, when they do. And they never disrupt, except that one. And she regretted it. The woman who called the organizers, she regretted it. Generally, they're excited about it and they join in. And they do become, of course, co-creators. At one of the talks we gave, one of the people who got it asked a question that was really long and crazy and fun to answer. So literally it's happened already, but yeah, you're right that maybe we should reach out a little more to people afterwards and engage them. Okay, we'll try it. It's a good project.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm trying to find out from Luigi whether we're supposed to. Do you want to continue at 1? Because we had originally said 12:30, so you want to say 1 o'clock?
I think.
Okay, let's go to 1 then. So can we take again questions in groups and keep them short? We'll take these 2 questions here. Kyonga's been holding her hand up. Okay, the woman in the blue shirt has also been holding her hand up. I'm sorry, I recognize you. And then so those 3 questions right there.
And my question is, what kind of funding do you get for your projects, and who funds them?
Okay.
I rarely have simple questions, but I think this is actually pretty simple. It's a question from Andy. And I'm interested in how much you guys are actually consciously talking about constructions of race and gender in your work. So how much the ease with which you can do whatever you want to do really relies on your being white and male and quite presentable.
I think that Brad's comment at the end, where you were asking where this project leaves these people and you a number of years later, relates to the question that Dee was asking about how does one proceed, and it also maybe relates to the funding question answer that's coming up, which is how does resistance how does it become sustainable? In other words, as a certain aspect of the project becomes social work, like what Sharon was describing, and once you present the artwork is presented, and once it's presented, a certain audience has access to the work. But what kind of inroads could we make in terms of the sustainability of the projects that we can have?
Okay, who wants to go first?
Well, I'll just answer those questions briefly. I think that most artists are incredibly resourceful, and part of that suitcase of resources is often taking jobs in academia, and that becomes a source of funding. For myself, that's part of it, but it's also about engaging with people who own the spaces, who own the venues, who own the environments, who fund it, not necessarily fund me, but who will fund the project so that it can exist. And also, I do a lot of really cheap stuff, and that's important, and there's obviously an important history in cheap stuff. Speaking of, and the web, hey?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay. We have a nonprofit organization that we set up a long time ago, before I realized that you don't really have to do it yourself. But I think there's enough places that provide fiscal sponsorship that give individuals the opportunity to be able to sort of apply for that area of family foundations that would otherwise be limited to those who have a 501c3 organization. So for a long time, the work was able to sustain itself through fundraising and development, and very much like maybe an independent filmmaker might try to put together the budget to make a film. So, you know, the envisioning and drawing and sketching out ends up taking the place of grant narrative in several cases, where it's about trying to think through what this work is going to be and how to make that happen. So, although, you know, I think what we haven't been able to do very well is also use that 501c3 status towards individual gift and giving. And when you look at most nonprofit structures, really the vast majority of their funds come from individual giving, not foundation-based giving. And so I don't know, but I think there are a number of different artists who are finding ways of being able to access those funds. And you know, there are great organizations like Fractured Atlas that provide fiscal sponsorship in a very open and easy manner.
Funding is easy. What we do also doesn't cost very much. It looks like it does, but we have volunteer help on all of it. So and basically the expense is the plane tickets, and everything else is just free. But we have jobs in academia, both of us. As for the race question, and I think what helps us is, I think we could do it regardless of our identity. We do have a sense of entitlement in just being able to barge into places, maybe that comes from being white males, and not being self-conscious about that. I don't know. But that also depends a lot on being more than one person, being two or more people, and just kind of peer pressure, kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of bolstering each other's, Enabling. That's exactly the psychological term I'm looking for. Enabling each other's addiction to this weird behavior and kind of diffusing doubt and worry about it. Both of those things, though, probably help us to do that. But I think once on the stage, I have no way of knowing, but I imagine that it would work regardless. Of course, there is a big history of bigger crackdowns, legal crackdowns against people of color that might affect us in such a case. Maybe we would actually get sued. Maybe, who knows? It's conceivable given history of the civil rights struggle and so on, that we would be more affected by that sort of thing. So far, we've never gotten sued or really arrested significantly. But it's all hypothetical.
So I totally disagree with you. So I haven't talked very much, but I have to say I completely disagree with you. And it has to do with the logic of who gains power in spaces of commerce. And effectively, the chances of a black man or woman being the CEO of Exxon are very slim. And so there are certain roles in terms of the possibility. In other words, you couldn't necessarily pass as someone who looked radically different from yourself, even if people hadn't seen that person. They might know of them, or they might have seen them somewhere else. So there's that element. But there's also the question of believability in terms of a certain likelihood of status and a certain body that goes with that status, in the same way that there's a haircut and a suit and a whole set of other things that are kind of required accoutrement, right? So while I wouldn't say that you won't find a broad spectrum of genders, races presented in the corporate, if you will, compendium, it's just less likely that passing happens with such ease for certain bodies in certain places in the hierarchy. So I would say that, anyway, that's my comment on your comment, but
Yeah. We never pass for important people, though. That important. I wasn't the Exxon CEO. What? Yeah, so I wasn't trying to pass as somebody that important. That wasn't the CEO. That was like somebody who replaced the CEO at the last minute because the CEO was busy. Because we couldn't find anybody who looked like the CEO. That everybody knows what they look like, or